So Harry, I think we we are waiting for you to open your mic and respond here.
I'm here, neighbor. No, I'll
Yeah.
still stand. Not in terms of a defiant stance, but I still hold onto these things. Because of course, one
Okay.
of the major things for me. I've studied Norway for a while when it comes down to this, long
Yes.
before Jamaica had the potential to get oil. Um, and for me, there's a lot of work to be done on the framework of Jamaica. Um, the election brought me back to a very key part where a specific institution attempted to rig that election, which shows us
Wow.
their institutions here that while we may praise them, still have a very high level of possibility when it comes down to corruption, and
Yeah.
that in itself takes time to be eradicated. Now, it is not to put down the trust in the people to do what is right, and the stance on it is there's still some level of work to remove strongholds in key institutions, right? We recently get another look at what's happening in our health sector with the UHWI. So a lot of these things will be coming to the forefront, and we have to deal with them prior to something as critical as oil. So I'm very much optimistic like everybody else, but I'm also cautious based on what have been culturally engraved in these very systems. And I know it will take a few more years to reduce it to an accepted level. I know in terms of indication for where overall Jamaica corruption lies, we're still number 44. An advancement in that is an indication that we're moving in the right direction. And again, that in itself still needs a few times because you can't remove it in its entirety, right? I would never be expecting that, but you have an obligation to reduce it as best as possible so there's no longer a stronghold in these institutions throughout. Because to be getting another chance from a natural resource is nothing to play with. It is also nothing you can fully left up to the sentiments of people overall. And I know we're getting, for example, our financial sector framework being built out after it was ravished in the 90s coming up. We're still working on that. I'm in it, so I know and hear the cries as to what's happening within that aspect of it. And then because oil is a new thing for our legislation, it's going to take a while for us to build that out. So it's never straightforward as we would want to see. So I'm optimistic yet cautious to ensure that we don't play or give anything another chance to put our freedom at jeopardy.
Yeah. But we have heard about this oil exploration for maybe more than a decade, Harry. You don't think that the government would have been preparing itself for this hour? And that's number one. Number two, if you were to advise the government, let's say the advice to them is that we have found oil of sufficient quantity that we can start extracting and refining. How would you advise the government to proceed from here on in?
For me, neighbor specifically, it is one in which I know they would have talks about it because 10 years ago it wasn't a realistic thing. The results were not this forthcoming and promising. So it was more in terms of on the back end, on the back burner when it comes on to the discussions of it, especially when we were handling other damning situations, right? So it wasn't a discussion fully developed throughout. Of course, again, I'm not at the table to know the full extent of it, but it wasn't something heavily looked at in that aspect. Now, in terms of advising the government specifically, neighbor, it has to be on the frameworks. We've seen what Melissa has done, right? Undoubtedly, this government is the best when it comes down to risk management. But we've seen that Melissa has unearthed a lot of poor frameworks throughout the island, not just the West, right? And we continue to unearth a lot of the poor frameworks that are there. And I'd want to say the first stance is to strengthen these frameworks. And it doesn't stem just across the financial sector and manufacturing, but there's a heavy duty when it comes on to environment as well. So it will have to be a multi-faceted approach throughout. And legislation is the key part of this when it comes on to the protection of the resources, the protecting of the people's production as well and productivity, and also the sustainability of this, because oil will not always be here. And this is why Norway is a key country to study when it comes on to this. It is how you structure your legislative framework that will help you to be ahead of the game. Because if we find oil, we're not competing with the region. We're competing on a larger scale. We are dealing with a standard that will be pushed by the people on the ground, which means they'll be under severe, I'd say, workload to produce more. And yes, the current government has been able to do so with strap resources, but you still have to ensure that these frameworks are not necessarily foolproof, because you'll never get it perfect, but robust enough to withstand governmental corruption.
Fantastic.